There are roster moves that slip by us that we may not think anything of at the time, but there's something interesting going on with Vancouver. So we can all agree Elias Pettersson next year is going to be the big guy. And when you go to a Vancouver game, Brock Besser can be announced as if he's Brock Lesnar. And with Elias Pettersson in the lineup, we can all ask who walks with Elias. And all WWE fans will love the Canucks next year. How far will you walk with Elias is going to be the question for the Canucks next year. Darren Archibald gets signed and called up. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do something similar to what I did with Yanni Gourde, but with something different. Okay, so this isn't just the Darren Archibald story. Archibald, undrafted. 11-12, plays for the Chicago Wolves, which was the Canucks farm team at the time. 20 games, 1 goal. Ends up with Kalamazoo, which is the ECHL, thus the asterisks. 49 games, 45 points, 59 penalty minutes. And I'm including the penalty minutes for a reason, and we'll get to that. 12-13, he plays 18 games for Kalamazoo, 13 points, 29 penalty minutes. Gets called up to the Wolves, 55 games, 22 points, 47 penalty minutes. Now, I've never been a guy who's been big on Darren Archibald. But, let's continue. 13-14, he plays 16 games for the Canucks. No penalty minutes, 3 points with a goal. That's the only NHL action this guy's ever seen. He's 27 years of age. 13-14, he gets sent down to Utica, plays 59 games, 22 points, 102 penalty minutes. And at that point, I'm like, well, he's just a farmhand. It's just a farmhand. This is when the Canucks were also trying to groom Alexander Grenier to be a fourth liner. There was some belief that Grenier was going to be the fourth liner the Canucks needed. 14-15, 70 games, 24 points, 107 penalty minutes. Kalamazoo, he plays 6 games, 2 goals, no penalty minutes there. 15-16, 51 games for Utica, 19 points, 96 penalty minutes. So there's a lot of grit here. Archibald plays with a lot of heart. Last year, 76 games, 23 goals, 24 assists, 47 points, 58 penalty minutes. Offensive totals that are sort of out of line with what we've seen. I mean, here in Kalamazoo, sure, but Kalamazoo's the East Coast League. So this is the first time in the American League he really showed that offensive upside. Now, in a limited amount of action this year, he's played 25 games in Utica. He's got 16 points and 15 penalty minutes. The Canucks are lacking in grit. I'm not saying anything that every Canucks fan doesn't know. We lack grit. We lack pushback. When the Canucks sold off Burrows and Kessler and Lapierre went out the door and Bieksa went out the door, there was a movement towards the more skilled game. But there's a problem. There's a problem right now. Virtanen is seen as the guy who might be on his way out the door and going back to Utica. 47 games, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points. He has 28 penalty minutes. Virtanen has been cast as being perhaps the grit in the bottom 6. And while Virtanen doled out some thunderous hits when he was in juniors, I really don't know that the Canucks are casting him well as an NHLer. So there's 2 things I'm wondering here. One, are they sending Jake down? Or are they shopping Jake? Is Jake Virtanen on his way out of Vancouver? And is signing, they signed Darren Archibald today and brought him up. Is signing Darren Archibald a sign that Virtanen's on his way out the door and Archibald's taking his place in the lineup? There are Canucks that aren't performing, and I'm gonna go ahead and touch on those because there are a few. Nick Dowd, since he came over, 1 goal in 20 games, no other points. We didn't expect any of that from him, though. Burmistrov, of course, wasn't producing at the time that he left. Goldobin had a call-up of 14 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. Marcus Granlund's been a bit of a disappointment with only 12 points in 52 games, 8 goals, but 12 points is below what was expected. Brandon Sutter has dealt with injuries, as he does every year, 32 games, 4 goals, 12 points. Sam Gagner, for the amount of money he got signed for and considering the year he had last year, he's got 7 goals, 15 assists, 22 points in 52 games. That's trying. And of course, Louis Eriksson, famously 8 goals, 12 assists, 20 points in 41 games. I think Louis' actually been better than last year, but he was awful last year, so that's not saying a whole lot. The Canucks are in an interesting position, which is why I'm doing this video. So we can all agree that Pettersson's going to make the team next year. We can all agree it's going to be Pettersson gets a shot, and Jonathan Dahlen probably gets a shot at making the team next year. And whatever the Canucks get in the first round this year, whoever it is likely gets a shot at the roster next year. Probably a forward if they don't draft first overall. If it's first overall, Dahlen's the guy they're grabbing. Which might get difficult if Jonathan Dahlen and Rasmus Dahlen are on the same team. I mean, you know, it's going to be Dahlin and Dahlen, but yeah, it could be frustrating for announcers if those two are on the same team. And there's Adam Gaudette, that there's some speculation about him getting signed and joining the team. There's a lot of youth. But is there a lot of grit? These guys are finesse guys. This is the kind of grit the Canucks have needed. Okay, he can put up penalty minutes if he's asked to. He can drop the gloves if he needs to. Virtanen really at this point has never seized his spot in the lineup. He's been good at times. He's had some good games, but he sort of reminds me of Zach Kassian that way. I don't know that I trust Virtanen at this point to be more than what Zach Kassian's been in his career. He is a less abrasive, certainly a less controversial player than Zach Kassian, but I think with his offensive production, I think it's much the same. He leaves you thinking, you know what, he could be top 6. But, and I remember when Kassian was in Vancouver too, there was a belief of, well, coaches just don't give him the chance. If coaches gave him the chance, then Kassian would be a top 6 forward. And I was one that thought that. I used to think, just leave Kassian with the Sedins for a while and it'll be magic. And it wasn't. And Virtanen, he's been moved around a bit in the lineup, but Virtanen is not really the star player he was drafted to be. He was supposed to be a big power forward, and he's big, but the power forward hasn't really shown up yet for him. And I'm not sure that this necessarily means Virtanen's on the way out. I can see why. One of the reports that I read was that Archibald could take the place of what Derek Dorsett was, and they've never replaced that sandpaper in their lineup. But the timing tells me with the trade deadline 2.5 weeks away, maybe instead of sending somebody down, this is a sign somebody's on their way out the door. This might not affect Virtanen at all. This might be a sign that they've got a deal figured out for Vanek. Maybe Vanek's on his way out. They're not getting a warm body back to take his place in the lineup. So Archibald comes in and takes his spot. By virtue of there being an empty spot. And Archibald's not going to play on the same line as Vanek. Maybe it means Virtanen moves up. But I don't think that's likely. Something tells me Virtanen isn't going to stick around. I think maybe Goldobin gets called up. Archibald comes up and plays. And we start to see what Benning's vision for the future is. And I know there's people who love to trash talk Jim Benning and the job he's done in Vancouver, but he had one hell of a horrible hand. The worst hand in poker is a 2-7 offsuit. If you've got a 2-7 offsuit and you're playing Texas Hold'em, you're pretty much dead in the water. But what he left his GM with was one card, and it was a 2. And now he's playing Texas Hold'em against a bunch of other GMs that have 2 cards. Because he saddled them with really bad contracts and an aging roster that had already peaked and some no-trade clauses thrown in just for fun. And Benning's been really saddled with having to deal with bad contracts, players on the downside, and dealing from weakness. That's why I use the poker analogy. And he's done relatively well. Granlund's not playing well this year, but he's still an upgrade over whatever Shinkarik was going to do in the lineup. And I genuinely can see that there's something that he's doing with this team, and I think bringing up Archibald now, so close to the trade deadline, to me it says trade's coming. A trade is coming. So what I'm curious about is, if you're a Canucks fan watching this, is this a sign that Virtanen is on his way out of the lineup, going to Utica? That's the easy answer. The easy answer is Virtanen goes to Utica and solved. Or is this a sign of something else? Because I know the Canucks have to be looking at selling right now. They're just too far to the playoffs. Maybe they're looking at it and saying, if we sell sooner, we probably get a better return. And they'd probably be right. So who gets sold and for what? I think Vanek would make sense. Then maybe Virtanen gets a spot. You call up Goldobin. You have them fight it out. Figure out who's going to get a bump up. And at least you're looking at Virtanen and saying, all right, can he do this top 6 role? We're already out of the playoffs. Let's throw him the ball and see if he can run with it. And if he can't, in the offseason, we unload him. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think. So I figured I would do this before I do my review video. Let me know what you guys think. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And again, I realize this is about the Canucks, and I realize there are people that, say, oh, it's your favorite team, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And this, to me, is a curious move. It's a smart move because Archibald's been getting better, and he's 27. He's not over the hill, but he's as NHL ready as he's going to get. So whatever you see when he's on the ice, it's probably what you're going to get. He doesn't have the offense, but he does have the grit, and it could change the way that the Canucks play the game a little bit. And it could be a signal that maybe Benning's looking to toughen the lineup up a little bit in anticipation of the new rookies coming into the lineup and what they're going to bring. And it looks like it's going to be a great finesse game with Pettersson. It's going to be awesome. But you've got to have some grit out there too, because if it's all finesse, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. You have to have just a little bit of pushback in that lineup. And I'm not talking like a Ryan Reeves level pushback. I just mean just some grit in the lineup and some guys who can throw the odd checks here and there and kind of, cause the other team to be a little black and blue by the end of the night. So, again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And hey, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.